Hello, everyone, and welcome to another FuseBox Ask Me Anything. My name is Chris Chowan, and I am the Emerging Technology Coordinator at Wired Sussex. At the moment, to keep you occupied and to provide some content, we're doing a series of Ask Me Anythings with our fantastic FuseBox residents, where we talk about different areas and fields that they're working in. So hopefully we can have a nice chat, a conversation about it, but also they're here to answer any questions in chat if anyone is there to spark the conversation. So I think the best way to get started is for everyone to introduce themselves. So to my right, Matt, would you like first? Are you?
Hiya. My name's Maf'j Alvarez. I'm a digital artist and creative technologist and a user experience designer. So I work for HMRC, actually designing websites, usually Monday to Friday, but every few months I take some time off and I do virtual reality projects, and I'm a resident at FuseBox. Right now I'm working with an artist called Camille Baker, working on a VR prototyping project around the female reproductive system. It's a quite interesting project, and I collaborate with Andy and Sarah quite often as well. That's me.
Excellent. Welcome to the show. Sarah, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, my name is Sarah Ticho. I wear quite a few hats as a sort of producer, researcher, curator, someone that makes things happen, but across virtual reality, arts and healthcare. So I'm the founder of Hatsumi, and so we're developing a VR tool that looks at how you can communicate pain and emotions using 3D drawing in VR. I also work on another startup called Deep, which is a breath-controlled virtual reality experience that was developed in collaboration with the Games for Emotional and Mental Health Lab in the Netherlands. And we're doing lots of fun things about that, which I'll tell you guys about in a bit. And I'm also the healthcare lead for Immersive UK, so look into how we can create a bit more community and communication between academics, researchers, healthcare professionals, and artists.
Excellent. And last of all, Andy.
Oh, yes, I'm Andy Baker, and I've been thinking, whilst the other two are speaking, what the hell I'm going to say I do, because it's always a tricky one. Eclectic dilettante and denizen of the FuseBox who fiddles with things. I'll nick Maf'j's phrase, creative technologist, because that seems to cover a multitude of things. And webby person, sort of web developer. Yeah. Reluctantly.
Pays the bills.
Yeah, pays the bills.
There we go.
It's a really common theme, though, with all this stuff, isn't it? That especially in VR, that's just super multidisciplinary anyway. That I feel like everyone just wears so many hats that suddenly you have to give this elevator pitch, and it's like, but we all do so many things.
Yeah, I think also in the FuseBox there's a lot of themes, so it does mean that it's really multi. The one thing that this is really nice for me is that normally with the FuseBox open, I get to see most of you guys, regularly, every day in some cases, and it's kind of been hard not to be caught up with what people are working on. So it's a really nice opportunity to sort of hear what people are doing, keeping themselves busy at the moment. Now, I do have like a leading question that I know people I want to address today, which is particularly talking about the coronavirus at the moment, because I did actually title this Immersive in Lockdown in the end. I think it's having a huge effect on the immersive sector. And I was wondering how you feel, do you think immersive is finding its role in the lockdown? I don't know who to take that for. Anyone jumping at the opportunity? Yeah.
I mean, it's almost just like the classic thing with VR, which is that constant feeling of it's not quite there yet. The timing, so in a certain way, you thought something like this would be the moment for immersive to move into the spotlight, and it's perfect. But the same stumbling blocks that are hurting adoption are still there. People don't have the hardware. There's still not huge awareness generally. And there's a huge supply chain problem. So people couldn't actually get, even if everyone suddenly decided at the start of lockdown that they wanted a headset, that you couldn't get them, and they're still kind of hard to get. So no, it hasn't been a game changer for Immersive for lots of reasons. But I think all of us that are already kind of convinced that it has a role to play have had an opportunity to try it out and see its utility. So it's been interesting to compare Zoom meetings on one hand with virtual meetups to see what the kind of strengths and weaknesses of both are. And I think if I've taken away anything, I think you need a blended solution that does a little bit of both, and you need a way for people who don't have headsets to join people who do. And some of the great benefits of immersive meetups, being able to form little groupings and huddles and one-on-one conversations ad hoc, can be done without a headset. You just need a better UI around it. So there should be a platform that works on all, mobile, Mac, PC, headset, that enables everyone to join in and whatever their kind of means of access is.
Out of interest, what's the closest to that at the moment?
All the major VR platforms most of them social VR platforms allow you to join without a headset, but most of them don't have a Mac client, which is a real killer. I think AltSpace should really step up and release a Mac client. I've lost so many opportunities to promote it because of that. Mozilla are the only ones really seriously targeting fully cross-platform.
And that's because it's web-based.
It's web-based. And I'm a great believer the web will always win in the end because it's the only fundamentally open platform. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. I think this has shown, from my perspective, it's shown a bit of a gap in the market. Because I talk a lot about these platforms and saying, wouldn't it be amazing if we could do meetings and not have to attend physically? We could, have a really personable avatar, and it just feels natural to be able to talk like that. But in reality, I see not a lot of people are using it, which kind of proves that even though it might be a nice idea, it hasn't quite. And also, the headset shortage has been a big problem. Even if people wanted to action on it now, we've had people messaging saying, "How do we do it?" There's no real way to get hold of affordable headsets in any large quantity. I think China production is just ramping up for the Quest.
Yeah.
I think it definitely has been a real privilege for those of us with access to VR headsets, and because of the lockdown, then there's been a huge boom in social VR events that have been going on, and I have really enjoyed that there's a bit of an increased accessibility to things as well, and just thinking about how you can meet with people around the world and that people are far more open to it. So, for example, I was meant to be going out to a conference in LA called Virtual Medicine. So excited. I don't do stuff like going to LA very often. But of course it was cancelled because of the coronavirus. And so we ended up setting up almost a virtual reality conference in response to that. And it was really fun. We created it in AltSpace because we felt like that was probably the most accessible thing. And we were in this huge spaceship above where we were supposed to be in LA. We ran this conference. We had a giant 3D molecule of the coronavirus being shot at with lasers. And after doing this whole event, which was just so lovely to feel like you were kind of with people from all around the world that you would have never have met otherwise.
Yeah.
And then kind of finishing it with this Bonnie Tyler dance party inside coronavirus was really, really fun. And I really like that there are quite interesting novel uses of that, and it's really enhancing accessibility because it costs so much money to go to all these conferences. Not just money, time, we would have taken a week at least out of our lives to go there because you want to make the most of it as well, right? And now you can just be in your pajamas in your living room doing exactly the same thing, where actually if you're speaking at these things, that's 15 minutes of your time. But I think it's interesting how I think we're all starting to learn a bit more literacy around this, because what I keep on seeing is people just trying to replicate reality in VR, and just lots of conferences where it's just really dry and you're just sitting in a really boring conference room, being completely passive, sitting in a chair. Everything's just really bland and grey and someone's standing there presenting. And it's guys, why are we not in the jungles in Costa Rica or in, some amazing ice palace? We can create anything. So why are we just making stuff quite boring again? So
every new medium tends to fall into the trap of recreating the media that came before it. Like film was originally just pointing a camera at stage actors and getting them to do what they would have done on stage. And I think VR always, it's still mimicking other media and hasn't found a unique voice yet in many areas.
I think it's coming though. Andy and I yesterday were in VR chat and we were uploading worlds. So I think that the integration between the making tools and the creating the worlds and sharing them in these social spaces, that's improving. And putting the tools into the people's hands that can make them easily is one of the sort of ambitions that I've got. But yeah, I'm working a lot on prototyping right now, and I'm exploring AltSpace and VR chat and the developer tools that come for Unity with those, just to see if it's possible to collaborate with people. So I've had to take a blended approach, like Andy said, with the project with Camille, for instance. She's got a Quest and she lives in London. Not that it matters, she could live around the corner at this point. So she went into VR chat on her Quest. I created a world where I put the model of the reproductive system into this world, uploaded it to VR chat, and so she could then walk around in her avatar and I could walk around in my avatar, and these are non-human avatars as well. I mean, they could be any size as well. And we could walk around the model and discuss where we were going to position things. And at some point, maybe the audio kicked out, so I had to call her on WhatsApp. So I had a WhatsApp call going, and the VR chat. So we were in VR, but with WhatsApp as well. And I think it's about just being responsive to having to like switch platforms quickly. But the benefit of that experience was that we could actually physically walk around in the proposed space that we were going to make for her project and talk about some of the issues around it. And I could invite her and other people from wherever. So that's quite powerful. So I'm using this opportunity to make prototypes with people.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I've always really liked about your process, Maf'j, is that you make it very accessible and easy for people, including myself, that can be really intimidated by developing in VR. And so you have that understanding of it. I think just having people with very different perspectives, obviously I do stuff in VR, but being able to have, like at the FuseBox once, then we had someone called James Wannerton that is the president of the Synesthesia Association that has like lexical gustatory synesthesia, and he tastes color, and having people with these completely different like worldviews and experiences, and thinking, well, how is what you do or what's important to you translated in VR? And I think just getting out of these little bubbles that we still can very easily find ourselves in is really important, because that's how you have all the mad ideas, is just having that sort of diversity of experience and just playing around and seeing what emerges from a small conversation.
I find some really good inspirations to watch Tomorrow's World, because you can see how
wow,
if you look at like the future tech that they're looking at, you can see how like narrow-minded the view is of what's going to happen.
Do you mean old Tomorrow's World still running?
No, but I'm meaning old Tomorrow's World, like the
When it's
still nuclear powered vacuum cleaner, that type of era. There's so many ideas where they were showing all these technologies, and I think at one point they even touch on virtual worlds and things. And it seems that like the image of what a virtual world is going to be hasn't actually changed that much since all that time ago. And whereas
influenced by our childhood and all the stories that
we're going to hear,
our idea of what the future is, right?
Sci-fi is the greatest thing ever made. No,
there was a really great talk at a conference called Deconstruct by Clear Left in Brighton, years ago. There was a guy called Matt Novak, who's a paleo-futurist, and he just talks about how things like the Jetsons and just all of those sort of nostalgic things that we grew up on completely influence what we're making now with hoverboards and self-lacing trainers. And like, even I recognize that in myself. Like, I grew up watching Sabrina the Teenage Witch and basically just want to be Sabrina the Teenage Witch. And VR lets you do that, and it's great. And I love that there's this childish, playful element to so much innovation that genuinely does do helpful, meaningful things. So I don't think they should be two separate worlds.
I think I've seen that people, you have to like when I was because we did the Brighton Immersive meetup in VR, and so I was trying to keep a level of production quality to the evening. But I think that you have to sort of accept that with a lot of the virtual platforms at the minute, they're not quite there in terms of polish entirely, and I think you've got to be accepting of having fun with it. So I think one of the reasons that AltSpace originally didn't look like an ideal platform was it looked a little bit gamified. But I think that that's exactly what it's there for, and I think that's actually what they're all going to be until we end up with some immaculate configuration.
You've brought this round to something I really wanted to talk about, which is the aesthetics of avatars and how people look. I don't think any of you guys were at the Immerse UK virtual conference this last week. They use a platform called Engage, which picked a kind of a semi-realistic look to the avatars, and I feel really strongly that until it's the whole uncanny valley thing. If you're going to aim for realistic human beings, you either have to do it right or you plunge into the uncanny valley, and it just looked odd. Everyone looked odd, and it looked like. I was thinking of the Autons in Doctor Who, the creepy shop window dummies that come to life, and it just had that feeling. And comparing that to AltSpace, which has this kind of cartoonified, stylized look, it was just much nicer. I think you've got to go stylized. Struggling with business-oriented things, you can't go cutesy and cartoony. So it's interesting. I'd like to talk to some designers and illustrators and think, what would the correct aesthetic be that managed to avoid the two traps of bad realism versus cutesy cartoony? How do you get something that looks professional and how would you represent yourself in a business conference in a non-realistic way?
And if you like some really good customer avatar customization, I really like is on the Museum of Other Realities, if you've ever tried that. And I think it's really nice how you can customize your avatars in quite a variety of ways. Like you're kind of almost jigging all these little bars. You can change the shape of your head and the color and things, but they just seem to have really nailed something about how you appear, and it just feels like a much more personable interaction with people in some ways, and they just seem to pick up body language in a very good way as well. But gosh, it has such an influence, doesn't it? Like I spent so much time in half and half as well.
That's got a really nice look.
Yeah, and again, like it's really silly and cartoony, and I really recommend, if anyone hasn't seen it, to look it up, because it's just a really lovely example of social VR that's quite playful and very, very good, like small, subtle things in it that I really enjoy. So one of the worlds that you can go into is like the ocean, and you can just sit and chat to friends and hang out with fish. But as you move your hands in, there's like this very subtle haptics, and it's like your hands are going through the water, and I just think it's genius. But you're these kind of cute little characters. I think they call them Wanda, and you just have these like cute wiggly arms, and it just, of course, it completely changed the dynamics with how you interact with someone. But I think it would be quite fun to try and do something businessy in there. Like imagine pitching to an investor when you're all just like cute little wiggly avatars, and how that would completely change the interaction between the two, for good or bad. But I think it's interesting to experiment.
A lot of business design and business aesthetics falls into this awful, serious, slightly dated power aesthetic that looks, I think a lot of business presentation software and business motion graphics just falls short.
They look a bit like government infographics.
Although conversely, Britain, YouGov has quite a nice aesthetic. So, but I think
for me it's about distraction or not, isn't it? Because what I've noticed when I take people into VR chat, which you can be any kind of character, you could be a toilet roll, or you could be like a monster, or you can be like a human looking creature, or a plane that flies around. I think that if you have to focus your session on something, you can't distract everybody, and I suspect that we just have to be more open to diversity in general. Because I think business meetings are changing now because of the coronavirus too. We're in each other's homes, aren't we? And we can easily be distracted by what's in each other's homes, as well as instead of focusing on each other. I was watching somewhere a politician, and I noticed the thing behind their head, and I was more like fixated on the picture behind their head than actually maybe, you know, focusing on them. So I suppose there's a place for uniform and uniformity of avatars as well. But we have to, I suppose, just accept that people have lives, and we're going to be involved in their lives a lot more going forward, and that's inevitable because of the coronavirus. So there is room for diversity and maybe helping us as humans to focus among distraction or something. Maybe we'll all have to just get better at it as well. But otherwise, yeah, you have to help people to focus on the issue at hand. That's why I suppose offices are quite boring and government websites are quite standard, so that you get it's less cognitive overload, because that is the problem. I've been talking to so many people now, and they're all saying that mentally they can't cope because of the amount of new paradigms that they're having to assimilate in their realities. Like, you know, I went to the corner shop just to buy milk, and the lady behind the counter was just saying how it's hard for her, because she knows that physically she can do everything she normally did, stock the shelves and all the rest of it, but her mind is so full of other things now because of the virus. You know, keeping herself safe, having contingency planning, and that's not a visual thing, that's just a life thing. And I think a lot of technology during the lockdown is causing us to have a lot of this cognitive overload, and it's tiring. So I suspect that we have to find a way to deal with that as well.
I think it's been interesting because a lot of it's really divided people based on personality type, how they've responded. And, you know, I think as much as a lot of people find you know, Zoom meetings, working from home, and all these things overpowering, a lot of people find commuting and being in an open plan office and all the things associated with physically going to work, you know, equally and differently overwhelming. So, you know, we've gained some things and lost some things at the same time.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely highlighted how different people's lives are as well. And I really, really feel for parents at the moment, especially where they're both key workers or people are separated or pretty much just under any conditions. And just, it's so funny when you see that difference between people Instagramming their sourdough bread that they've been making and like in their lovely clean house where they're like getting all their projects done or whatever, and then the reality that like not everyone has that privilege.
I made me feel guilty. I'm incredibly privileged. The situation I'm in is incredibly easy for me to handle the lockdown compared to let's not forget that not everyone has it as easy as we do.
Yeah, and I think especially people working in digital. I mean, there's so many of us that I think life isn't very different, actually. You know, you just need a computer and somewhere to sit and access to as much coffee as humanly possible. And that's sort of it. And so it's, I think it's very interesting thinking about how different industries are being affected. But I think, being like small companies that work in digital that are versatile, I think that now is a really good time because you can respond very quickly, and that there are, you know, people like us that can create things and prototype things and respond. So I think it's going to be interesting to see all the new ideas and projects and sort of innovations that are being born as a response to this. But I think remembering that it's not very diverse, and it's only the people that sort of have the privilege to be able to work in those conditions.
I think we're also lucky that we can work at the minute. Like, I don't know how I would have gone completely mental by now if I wasn't working, because I'm very quick to lose structure.
Very, very good at World of Warcraft, surely.
Well, yeah, absolutely, and losing structure.
Done loads of more like with the kinds of tests that you would have done if you were working. You strike me as the kind of person that would have just been experimenting with all sorts of things. Yeah. Anyway, and you probably would have learned some really useful skills. I mean, there's a lot of. I'm never bored at home. I think I could live on a spaceship. That's my conclusion out of all of this. I think if you sent me on a mission to Mars, I'd probably be all right.
As long as there was internet access.
Well, but yes, precisely.
Netflix.
I think that wouldn't occupy a lot of physical space. Yeah. Because that's the benefit of virtual. You can create endless, boundless spaces, and I think that is beautiful when you really are enclosed in a small space and not having sunlight. I mean, I think I'd struggle if I was on a spaceship with no sunlight.
I also think Beat Saber's probably the main source of exercise for me at the minute.
So. Yeah, right.
Thank God for VR.
Yeah, well, I think there's some really interesting applications of VR, especially at the moment for well-being, and yeah, definitely exercise. There's a really good publication. I think it's Forbes, with a guy called Jesse Demiani, who's the editor of VR Scout, that just wrote a really good article about exercising in VR naked. I think Andy had some opinions about
yes, I did. I remember I replied to that tweet.
But I think also, the social stuff is super duper important, feeling connected to people when we're isolated. And whilst I think like physical, like genuinely human interaction and being in the same place, or just, God, like having hugs, like it really highlights how important all those social things are. But having places where you can meet your friends, and like, I've tried to like hug people in VR. Well, and they've tried to hug me back. I'm not. Anyway,
hugging random people.
I'm so lonely.
They're not even in a VR headset. You're just walking around in the streets hugging people.
But I think having those like social interactions are super important. I think that there's definitely a role in that. Also, just feeling like you're in nature. There's been lots of really interesting research that's shown that even when you're simulating nature experiences in VR, then that can give you a lot of the sort of physiological benefits of actually being in nature as well.
I remember the first Christmas I had VR, and I took it around to my dad's, and we had the typical exhausting Christmas day, and everyone went to bed. And I ended up sitting on the sofa there's an app called VR Regatta, which is a yacht sailing app. And I was just lying on the sofa as if I was lying in a small boat, listening to the seagulls and looking at the ocean and thinking, what a perfect way to end a Christmas day. And it was, I did that feeling of peace you get. It wasn't quite as good as really sitting in a boat and really listening to seagulls, but it was better than sitting in a living room surrounded by party hats and turkey debris.
So I think that leads me on to the next question quite well, which is, outside of the social apps, what sort of VR content and well, it's actually one of George's questions he wrote in. He was saying, how do you use VR? What platforms do you recommend? But at the same time, what are you doing in VR at the minute? I'm mostly Beat Saber, so that's always me. And also, I mean, Sarah, you might want to take a lead in healthcare if there's anything that you've seen going on out there. Are the headsets being sort of thrown out the hospitals at the minute that have them, or are they being used, or is it just not even considered? Because hygiene's the problem with that, of course.
I think now is a very important time for digital health in general. I mean, the fact that the NHS were able to integrate telemedicine in like 2 days after I think lots of people have been fighting for years and years for this, then there's definitely much more openness about how VR can be used therapeutically as well. And so, I mean, personally, I'm really interested in the well-being aspects as well as the more clinical stuff. So I've been spending lots of time in Tilt Brush because obviously I'm really interested in 3D drawing. So with my own tool, in fact, I've been doing like body mapping every day. So sort of illustrating how I'm feeling and keeping a sort of visual diary of what each day has been like, and being able to kind of combine that with more standard measures of well-being, just to see if there's some interesting patterns that I can learn. But I've also been chatting to, so in Brighton, then the Brighton University have just opened the Centre for Arts and Wellbeing, and there's some really interesting researchers there. And a while ago I got given this lovely book called A Drawing Companion. And it was by a whole collection of artists and researchers, but someone called Philippa Leon that gave it to me. And it's like all these really lovely drawing for health sort of activities. And so I've been having lots of fun translating them into VR. So it'll be things like closing your eyes and like drawing around your hand, and or not drawing around your hand, but like touching your hand with your hand and then drawing it with your eyes closed. So I've been doing stuff like that in virtual reality and just thinking about how these things sort of translate. And yeah, just like lovely little relaxation things, and then also lots of cathartic shoot 'em ups and stuff. But yeah, I think that people are much more receptive into the digital applications of healthcare as well. So I've been working with Torbay Hospital down in Devon, and they've been setting up a VR wellbeing lab for specifically for staff, and giving them a bit of relaxation and respite. So one of the projects I'm involved in, Deep, the breath controlled VR experience. Then we've just been releasing lots of data from the research about it, but we're now using it with staff there as a sort of relaxation thing, and combining that with them sitting in like massage chairs as well,
nice.
Which has been really nice. So we've been getting some really good feedback already on that. But I think, yeah, in terms of like training staff remotely, it's also really valuable. Also in pain management, there are lots of patients that are actually already just buying VR headsets to help them manage their pain at home. There's a really amazing patient advocate called Kay Smith that talks quite publicly about how she's using it in that way as well. But yeah, there's all sorts. But I think at the moment it's about looking at the low-hanging fruit and what can we use already that's like safe and effective, that isn't necessarily people trying to treat themselves at home, but just nice ways that it can help people feel a bit better.
I wonder if this could be a big moment for Deep as well, from the breath control side.
Well, yes, it is. There's lots of quite exciting things underway at the moment, actually. We're going to be starting to do some trials looking at how it can be used in respiratory, especially in like lung rehabilitation as well, because I guess for those of you that don't know about Deep, then yeah, it's a breath control game, but you have a belt around your diaphragm, and so through that, measuring your diaphragmatic expansion, and that's what sort of powers you through this beautiful underwater world. And so all the research so far has been looking at it as a tool for managing anxiety, and also how it can help reduce disruptive classroom behaviour in children with complex needs. But yeah, now we're looking at how it can be used in the fight against COVID, and how it can help people with breathing pattern disorders, or generally with lung rehabilitation. But we are now working on our Oculus Quest release, and so really excited about having it more accessible to people.
Absolutely. Now, there's a couple of sort of less immersive things I wanted to talk about, because Maf'j, I know you've been part of some of the 3D printing groups. I wonder if you want to talk about that a little bit, and what you've been making there.
Yeah. So yeah, when that kicked off, it was amazing how quickly it all happened, and I think that's just the power of the internet and various social media applications like Slack. But within a few weeks, 7,000 volunteers with 3D printing access signed up to a Slack group and put together a crowdsourcing platform page and raised loads of money. And they're called 3D Print Crowd. And I think you joined as well, didn't you, Chris?
Yeah. We're printing behind me. I had to stop because it's a really, really, really annoying process. It's so loud. Yeah.
So I've been printing headbands, and I was just telling Sarah about Prusa. So Prusa Research in Czech Republic have been, it's an open source model that has been adopted by 3D Print Crowd, but loads of other groups that are doing this kind of response. And because it's been sort of roughly approved by medical bodies and for release, so thousands and thousands of these headbands have been generated by individuals like me and like you, and then it's just the collective effort of like other like small cells in terms of locality. So there's a Brighton group that a guy came round and picked up some from me, went to someone else and picked some up, and then the whole relay, the operation of getting these like 20 or 30 or 50 headbands to a central hub for assembly, because I can't put together the visor and the elastic, but this assembly hub.
Is your printer too small?
Yeah, no, my printer's fine. It can't print the visor and the elastic. Yeah. That's the point. But it can definitely print the headband. So the last drop I had like 50 that I sent off.
Nice.
It's just fantastic to be part of that, and the willingness of people just to take part. But they've asked us to reduce the production. They've said 10 a week now. So I'm giving it a break.
I've actually had I've got the FuseBox's 3D printer with me here.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's the build platform is it looks about 5mm too small to print the full mask headband on its own. So I'm now printing support chin straps and all of the like printing little parts and attachments for the Velcro and things.
Yeah.
But I've now had to partner with someone else who then we both sync our shipments so they get put together at the distribution center. It's so cool. It's really cool to see the public just put something together.
Yeah. So I've been involved in a different group as well. So that one just shot off in the sense that it was a very simple thing to do, and it was fairly non-contentious. And I don't know if you've seen on TV or reports, it's just the face shield. So it's a fairly simple thing. But there was another group that I got involved in at the same time with Seb Lee Delisle and Paul Hayes and various others, and some anesthesiologists as well. And that was to produce a snorkeling mask adapter. But that was a little bit more contentious because it was more of an enclosed face shield, and it had to have a really tight fit, and that was going to be used by surgeons and people in a very sort of vulnerable situation. So that stalled a little bit because they really did have to get approval. But that's been interesting to watch as well, just how all the doctors and people have been involved in that conversation.
Unfortunately, I was late to the party 3D printing because I joined that group first, and I was waiting to get something to print, and nothing came through, so I switched over.
Me too. I switched to the other one, but it's interesting, and I think it shows you how quickly you can prototype and release and test as well. And how all the doctors are sharing their knowledge. So I feel like I've been party to kind of a little bit more information about some things around transmission or decontamination and some of those efforts as well.
I mean, some of the doctor talk I was so monumentally out of my depth trying to read along to that.
Yeah,
it's just like, tell me when you need me to print something.
Yeah.
I've been helping a little bit with the anesthesiologist you mentioned about data visualization. They needed to pull data from a machine that goes ping and show it because they've been using bits of paper. And just like Chris said, the minute they start explaining something to you, it gets technical very quickly. And I had to keep saying, explain it to me as if I understand none of the words you're using, because that was essentially true.
Yeah.
Talk to me in terms of that squiggly line should be next to that squiggly line.
Do you want me to tell you how I'm going to program this in great detail? There we go.
Yeah.
It's interesting being on that side of things technically, because quite often people can say that sort of thing to us. We'll be the jargon slingers, and they'll say things like to us, like, well, talk to me about this tech, this VR, this integration, this tool set or something in that way. And it's interesting being on the other end of it, isn't it?
Maybe that's the cure for being overly geeky, is you're forced to spend time with doctors or anyone else that needs 6 years of training to do their job.
Isn't that how you become more geeky?
Yeah.
But I think it's so important. I think in a medium that is meant to be so collaborative and, like we said right at the beginning, that is so multidisciplinary, then to get really good at that, then we need to master how we communicate. And also, I think thinking about these hierarchies as well, because I think there's a really classic thing that like a lot of people will prioritize almost like the science behind it, but actually it's the UX and how it's designed that is also just as important. And I think finding that way that when you're working with someone that you can both clearly articulate what you need and mean, and find this way of being able to make sure that neither the design or the messaging is ever compromised is a really tough challenge to do. I think especially when you're doing it for the first time. And I think that's what I've been really enjoying about being part of Deep as well, is just that there's all these artists that have these really cool mad ideas. Like we had this strategy week the other week, and kind of presenting all these mad ideas that seem totally off the wall, and then the scientists will sit there and go, yeah, do you know what? And this applies to like this psychological theory. And actually, if we just adapted that, then that would work very well as a health intervention. And then the artist was like, oh, I didn't really think about it like that. And it's just, having that good way of communicating and thinking about how you communicate as well when you're not necessarily in the same space. Because for so long, it's always been like, we need to do this in person. And so how can things like VR or other tools help us even make it easier to collaborate?
Yeah, I think so. And also testing frequently. I think it's really good to be able to just get something, even if it's not the perfect environment, but out there and getting people in there, sharing and talking and then testing, and that is what's brilliant. And if the internet goes down, I don't know what we'll do, because I have these visions of it all being like under curfew or something, like we'll only have it for 2 hours every day or something like that. yeah, because we're so lucky right now that we can do that. And just traveling around and stuff. I think about those kinds of futures of like, if we have to be in quarantine, what does that mean for travel? So it's starting making me think about lots of business ideas as well around what VR and can be used for in terms of letting us be in other places. Because Andy's right. I mean, when we can physically travel to Paris for a weekend, we don't consider VR a thing that you might want to do, or if you want to go to Thailand and you might travel there by plane and stay a month or whatever. But now thinking that we're not going to be able to go places, then VR does become a very attractive proposition, doesn't it, in a way? And also, you know, if you had better 5G or streaming, you can think of applications where you have local tour guides and things. That's something that I've been thinking about a lot. Where, you know, it could be the Uber of tourism or something, but using virtual reality or telepresence.
So the big unsolved problem with meetings and telepresence is facial expressions. Body language is doable. Body language is you can see how that's going to be solved. You just need a good kind of something like the Kinect, but better and cheaper. But facial expressions, if assuming that we don't invent a way of having headset-free VR, we're going to have a way of having facial expressions and human likenesses when you can't just film someone's face because they're in a headset. And you can see where I'm going with this. The face swap technology that we were looking at earlier before the call. I remember people doing. There's actually been some work on this.
Do you want to
where
pull it up, Andy, so you
they can. Yeah, I got this.
Come on, show us. I forgot about that.
But that would mesh really nicely with wearing a headset, but having a live representation of your face as if you weren't wearing a headset.
Yeah.
This is called AvatarFi, and it's open source. It's on GitHub. Anyone can run it, and it's a lot of fun. You need a beefy PC. My laptop can't quite keep up with it.
Andy, very quickly, could you move the window just to cover the link for the meeting?
Oh.
Lovely.
That'll be fun, though.
Getting Zoom bombed. Luckily,
Yeah.
this is why I use Google Meet, as we can approve. There we go.
All right. Hello.
So this is kind of real-time deepfakes.
Sorry, Helen. Yeah.
What happens if you open your mouth really wide?
Yeah,
So it's different. Some of them, but let's see if I can.
Because he doesn't know what his teeth look like, so it can't really do teeth.
I know, but there's like a fun little.
his mouth does open because he's got
Yeah.
quite a lot of black in between his mouth. So if he opens, it's a big.
Let's see.
Do you wonder if this is closer to Uncanny Valley than anything we've ever seen? Particularly if it came out in 3D.
I don't know. It's a weird mix. There's some creepy things, but there's also some genuine, there's some genuinely natural things about it. It's you can glimpse, given more development, how this could be a really good. It's genuinely expressive, and a bit too expressive. But
the thing is one question I have is this is quite good with a camera, but if you paired, I still don't see people. There are people that are doing motion detection using sensors around the eyepiece of the headset and things.
yeah,
But I do think there could be a framework that's a complete combination of cameras, sensors, and feeling the motion on the face as much as seeing it with a camera.
Yeah, I mean,
Because that will give it the info.
Find a way that makes it less complicated as well. Like, is there something like a Connect right on your face that would work well? Because I know at the moment then Entech, who are also Brighton based, and I know do lots of stuff with the FuseBox, have created this really interesting sensor so that it can recognise emotion and facial expressions and is pretty effective. But it's going to be interesting seeing the whole pipeline from that being quite an expensive, complicated piece of kit to things that are just really simple. And is it just that when we have the headset on that there's going to be like a little scanner that is able to capture our face? And also
maybe we're solving the wrong problem, that actually when headsets get down to the size that not much bigger than a normal pair of spectacles, that we won't need any of this, because it won't matter that you're in a headset.
But yeah, I think there's so many things that need to be considered along the way. I think already with a lot of the stuff that's going on with like AI and face recognition and just being able to plant like your face onto other people's faces is quite nerve-wracking, especially when people are using it in things like revenge porn or, you know, like faking other people's identities. And like, I love experimenting, and I think, you know, we shouldn't necessarily limit people, but there are lots of like ethical questions that need to be considered when how this can be misused.
And sometimes the tech industry does move a little bit quicker than the ethical sort of questions come along with it. So I think deepfakes are starting to getting a lot of attention at the moment, though, with all the like software designed to detect it as well, and then software that's designed to beat the software that detects deepfakes. So you're going to end up with a battle going on of people trying to prove what's real and what isn't. But
yeah,
in a way, it's a moot point. People believe stuff.
Oh, that eye.
I love that.
People believe absolute. If people believe in flat Earth, then worrying about whether deepfakes are convincing or not is beside the point. I think the bounds of what people are prepared to believe has we have a problem with education and understanding and critical thinking way beyond deepfakes.
But still, I think it has very quick, easy uses that could potentially ruin people's lives, you know. And if you start doing deepfakes with, you know, anyone showing them doing something they don't want to be seen doing, and you put that out, then, you know, them just saying, oh, it's a deepfake. Like, people could also use it as an excuse as well. And
everything becomes deniable.
The thing is, the one thing that does have me concerned about this tech is that at the moment it's not hard to do, but it's not easy. It's not like you do need a reasonable PC to do it. You need a little bit of technical experience and like at least follow a YouTube guide. What I'm worried about is once this becomes a website where you just upload a video and you can churn them out.
I think it already
hosted.
is. So this installing this
well.
involved copying and pasting a few commands. I didn't have to do anything.
But I don't know. I just think that there's going to be a point when suddenly once everyone can do this easily, that's just going to become.
Well, you've got Face App, haven't you? I mean, you've got Snapchat.
Yeah, Face App went so crazy, but Face App is nothing compared to what deepfakes could do.
Sure, but it's inevitable. If it's going to happen, and it can happen, it will happen. And then the response is, what do we do about it? And what do we individually, like, what's our response to that? Where do we take it in our work? And like Andy was saying, or you were saying about software to track it, to know it. Also provenance in terms of data, or the source, the metadata around files, around proving that something is real. That's going to improve, isn't it? If you have to prove your identity using a phone, they're going to have to find methods that make it very difficult to use a fake. You know, holding up a video of you isn't the same as light being shone onto your face or something. And I think that those kinds of technologies are evolving. And I know the government's working on it's going to have to do more of that, especially now.
Yeah.
I don't want to be one of these and blockchain kind of people, but blockchain does as a central registry of provenance. There's a role. People have been talking about using a blockchain for press photography to help prove.
Yeah, I can see that blockchain's going to be a big part of that.
Andy, do you mind switching your webcam back on? you're now just a box.
Okay.
Also, do you think that, in terms of like, because what I've just been watching now, and this is less serious and let's be more artistic about it, watching Andy as Einstein, it occurred to me that we have to learn to play our digital avatars like musical instruments, in the sense that I could sort of see how you were starting to know how to move Einstein so that it did what you wanted it to do. In the way that
manner.
you pop a violin and just start doing that, you're not going to get a nice sound. But if you move a certain way, you're going to make Einstein do what you want.
And there's some really interesting research as well about how virtual avatars do really influence our behaviour as well. And like that there's kind of the ability to learn how to play it, but I think also understanding how it sort of plays us.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's some really interesting research that's been going on at Stanford Virtual Human Interaction Lab, and a researcher there called Jeremy Bailenson that did a research project on, it's called the Proteus effect, and how virtual avatars are really influencing how we perceive ourselves. And that actually, if we're, for example, a taller avatar in a VR environment, we will act way more confidently and often perform better in IQ tests as well. And so it's just like, how do these things really influence our behavior, and not just in that experience, but long term? And who are the people that are, sorry, I'm coming out really hard, regulate, and what are all the problems? But we do have to talk about this stuff, because, like, let's be honest, this stuff is happening, and we all do this because we believe in it, and there's so many lovely artistic things about it, which is exactly what gets me up in the morning. But yeah, how it can be abused, or how it can even influence us on a level that we're not even quite conscious of, then we have to really think about that when going through the design process.
You mentioned that, Sarah, but I think, was it you that were talking about body dysmorphia, and about how we can use VR in a positive way to make balance where there's an imbalance. I mean, for instance, if I go into VR chat and I become a much taller avatar, I have a much different perspective on the world that I'm in and on the people that I'm talking to. I remember going into this karaoke VR chat room, picking up the mic, and I was a sort of average height, like a human height, to my surroundings, but right next to me there was this tiny little anime character holding a teddy bear who must have been 1 foot tall, and we struck up a conversation, and that was the weirdest thing ever. But then, you know, I started to experiment with different heights of avatars myself, and you have a very different perspective. As a woman, quite often, like, I'm a lot shorter than men. If I go to a conference, I'll be like up to someone's armpits and generally looking up. So I've noticed that I tend to find a quite short man to talk to quite often, and like go and hang out with them, because I prefer to be eye level with people.
That's why you've been talking to me all this time.
Maybe that's why you and I get on so well, Andy. We're like kind of similar.
All of us get on, so it all makes sense now.
Friendship groups.
Yeah, but yesterday you and I were in VR chat, Andy, and you were like a little green character. And we experimented a little bit with height, but at some point you were just like running around everywhere, watching you. It was like watching Monsters Inc. You know, Mike Wazowski. And then
I really enjoyed being a really short green creature. I think that might be in my virtual future.
Yeah, and why not? Why can't we have sort of? Apparently, Jared Lanier was talking about, back in the day when he was doing tests on VR and stuff, he was saying that we have something like 5 or 6 different body avatars built into our human psyche, or our human biology, or like the homunculus. Like, we have ones with tails and extra limbs, and so that we can naturally embody other avatars quite easily that have tails.
Yeah. They did some amazing research on that, actually, because it was Mel Slater that did all the body swap illusion things, and that you could feel like you're embodied in another body. But there was really great article, in fact, that Gareth from the FuseBox shared with me last year, where they did body swaps with different animals in VR, and they found that did genuinely happen, and participants felt like they did actually have 8 legs and were a spider. And I think that's what's so fascinating, isn't it? How easy you can trick the mind.
Me and Gareth had an excited chat once about and brainstormed some ideas, and it's on my long list of unfinished or even not started projects, doing something with crazy spatial distortions and your VR avatar, and it'd be really fun to get back to that. Yeah. But I'll just wait until I read an article. Much better than me.
We're running out of time, I'm afraid, so I have one last little question, which is prompting at since we've been talking about avatars and sort of the future of tech and immersive. I couldn't have a whole chat about VR without bringing up Ready Player One at least once. In there they have the world, the Oasis, which is the one thing which that place always stands out as like a pinnacle example of what this virtual utopia could look like, although there's some problems with it. And dystopia at the same time. But the idea of, you know, this world where everyone's interacting and everyone's got avatars that are sort of realistic and relates to them. How do you standardize? And do you need to there needs to be a standardization for a platform to get to that size? Like, because if everyone can be a special snowflake, then everyone will be as special as they can be, which means everyone pushes everyone pushes everything to the limit to be the next.
Well, so what people wear, you don't end up with everyone dressing in crazy fancy dress all the time, I think there's pressures both to be individual and to conform, and they end up balancing out.
I mean, it's convenient that Ready Player One, that all the avatars match a somewhat consistent art style, even if they're all different pop culture references. But with different creators, you'd never have that, which I think would have quite a lot of an effect on how well people immerse themselves in that world. If it's all conflicting art styles and designs. And
I think VR chat shows you that quite a lot, but I've noticed a few behaviours in there where groups of people will turn up in the same avatar just for like fun. And I've seen it where people are, like, again, in this karaoke thing, where there was a newcomer and she was being talked to by about 4 or 5 other people, and they were saying, well, why don't you change your avatar or something? And that was a weird conversation, but basically she said, I don't know how to do it, this is my first time. And they collectively showed her how to change it, and suddenly they were all Michael Jackson, all glitching out to, like, and because the avatar had an animation that sort of glitched it, but they were suddenly 5 of them, 5 Michael Jacksons all standing there, all jumping around. So I think it's a case of it just reflects real life. People behave in VR in many ways like they do in real life, and it, you know, Tim Berners-Lee didn't want the internet to become like real life. There was an opportunity, there was a window in time when the web was young, where anything could be possible, and maybe people, like, redistribution of power and openness and the rest of it. But ultimately, it's just mirrored real life. The power and injustices and stuff that exist. There's always opportunities to do better, but people do what they do in real life in many ways.
And we have to be really critical of what the default avatar is, because it's always a white person, or more often than not a white person. And I think that when it comes to things like the Oasis or whatever that looks like, they're going to be created by rich white men again, which is like clearly what's happening. And Facebook are clearly working hard on horizons. And do we want a social media company creating this like metaverse that we're going to live within
and monetizing it?
I think it's because
remember in Oasis they have to pay for their avatars and pay for their clothes and virtual. And would a platform where you have to pay for that stuff, will that take off? How many rules would that type of thing have to have? This is a really big question for another day, I think. But with 2 minutes to go.
Definitely worth checking out the XR Safety Initiative that's led by an amazing person called Kavya Perlman. I've just joined actually their medical XR council, but I think they're really looking into standards and safety and how we do start to think about those issues. So.
I think you need to put a little list of links and references together for everyone afterwards, Sarah. You've touched on so many things that I'd quite like to look into.
How does your brain remember? Your very good memory.
You must have a list of names, because that's impressive. Before we go, Sam just said Ready Player One just showed that many people don't have creativity, as they can only decide to make the avatar look like a branded character. Very true.
And that's actually, if you look at the range of avatars in VR chat, there's a lot of everyone wants to be a character from something that already exists. That's a good half of the avatars.
I just wonder if you're going to standardize them. Maybe you're going to have to they'll all have to be off the shelf one day.
Well,
if people
that is a copyright nightmare. So,
there's just so many logistical problems with people being able to do their own thing. Because people are people on the internet.
People are people, but they self-police as well. And there's all kinds of dark places in VR chat you just wouldn't want to go, but I don't want to go to lots of places in the real world either.
Yeah, true.
And
very true.
That's not different. And to police that, that's what I don't like about alt space. I can't even sit down. And I really want to sit down in alt space. Everybody looks like they're about to leave because they're all standing up.
Yeah,
so there's a lot
before just
well,
it leaves a lot of people out.
The last thing I can do, because I think we've hit our 1 o'clock deadline, before we go, would everyone like to sort of say how people can get in touch if they want to find out more about what you're doing? Maf'j first again. I don't know.
Yeah. So I'm on Twitter. I think probably as my micro-blogging platform. That's at Limbic Fish. That's how you can probably find out what I'm up to.
Excellent. And Sarah?
Twitter's usually pretty easy. Just at Sarah Ticho, Sarah with an H, and then Ticho is me.
Excellent. And Andy?
I'm Andy Andy Bak on Twitter. My company is IXY, so my email address is andy@ixy.co.uk, IXXY. And I'm Andy Bak almost everywhere on every platform, because it's a stupid enough handle that no one else has got it.
Good shout. Okay, before we go, well, actually, yeah, I'm going to stop the stream now. So thank you everyone for coming and joining and watching. We have quite a few different people in chat as well. If you guys just stay there for a minute. But thank you everyone for joining. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Chris.
Thanks for sorting it out, Chris. Brilliant.
No worries.